Hey everybody, welcome back to this Define newsletter. As you know, we're taking this month to take a look at the presidential race from a deeper level, both on the Republican and the Democratic perspective. So tonight we have a featured guest, Joshua Baca. Joshua has been in all different levels of political advocacy and campaign management. He's been a field manager, a campaign director, and now he's the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at DDC in Washington, D.C. So we're going to give Joshua a second to introduce himself and share a bit of the perspective and the expertise that he brings to our Define newsletter today. Joshua?
Absolutely. So, thank you for having me. I would say you did a great job of summarizing my background. I'll add a few more details. I think sort of what my uniqueness is here is my background is kind of diverse, where I've worked on Capitol Hill, I've worked on campaigns on both the Senate and congressional level as well as the presidential level. And I kind of take that experience now and help our clients at DDC think through some of the big challenges they're facing on sort of the intersection of politics, policy, and communication. So we're constantly tracking and trying to understand voter trends and why people are voting the way they vote, why they think the way they think, and sort of all of that expertise and that background will sort of guide, I guess, our conversation today and what we're going to talk about.
Sounds good. So we're going to jump right in. If you had to give a 20, 30-second summary of the state of the Republican Party right now, what would that look like?
It's in flux and probably in really a transition that has not been seen probably in 30 or 40 years. So the way to think about it is there's a clear divide that's happening. You have one wing of the party that's sort of led by Paul Ryan, who has been sort of the philosophical thought leaders upon what Republican conservative philosophy should be. And I think particularly for Paul Ryan, after he was vice president and having been on a national platform and having lost, I think it really opened his eyes on the needs to sort of rethink and re-envision and find new ways to talk about what conservatives stand for and what the Republican Party stands for. And I don't think he ever envisioned sort of changing core beliefs of the party, being for free trade, being for low taxes, being against government intervention in healthcare. But more importantly, I think what he did after that is like, how do we talk about how the free enterprise systems help people get out of poverty? How do we talk about how low taxes, help revitalize small businesses in local communities that create jobs? How do we talk about how opening global markets means that local communities thrive here in the U.S.? And so he's really tried to, break down the barrier that the Republican Party has been the party of the rich or the party of the wealthy. And for the last 4 years, he was essentially begged to be the Speaker of the House when they got rid of Speaker Boehner. And I think ultimately he took the job with the hopes of having a nominee for president that would kind of subscribe to those beliefs. And if you really look at the 17 people who ran for the Republican nomination, probably 14, 15, maybe 16 probably subscribed to the general outlines of what Paul Ryan was trying to do. And then you have this guy from New York who has never been a Republican his entire life, who is like abrasive and loud and in your face, and really doesn't have any sort of core philosophy that he's built his sort of political beliefs on. And he's completely uprooted the party. And all of these things that Paul Ryan has been working on, Donald Trump is against free trade agreements. Paul Ryan is for it. Donald Trump said that he was open to increasing taxes. That's like been the pinnacle of what Paul Ryan has been opposed to. Paul Ryan has been articulating the needs to rethink, reimagine, and re-envision the way we deal with entitlements like Social Security and Medicare. And Donald Trump says, I don't even want to touch that. And the problem is like there is a clear divide upon who should be the leader of the party. And, based upon the way the primary played out, it's hard not to imagine that it's not in a state of transition where Republicans like Mitt Romney and George Bush and John McCain, like those may be the party leaders of the past, not even literally in the sense that they're like were nominated in the past, but their beliefs may be in the past. And now Donald Trump is sort of re-envisioning all of this. And I think to wrap it up is like the transition is also probably a state of frustration, because I think where people like Paul Ryan, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, a lot of people who have, spent, time and energy and money and have battle wounds to show of their needs to try to, and change the view of the Republican Party. there's no belief among them that Donald Trump has any sort of grand vision to help the party, that it's all about him. So if it lasts, if the vision and the things that Donald Trump is campaigning on hold to be true past this election, if he wins, I mean, it's going to be a totally different Republican Party than we've ever seen.
When you look at that idea of an entirely new Republican Party, what does that look like potentially for the advent of a third party to be successful? Do you feel that we will split off into a core past Republican Party and this new Republican Party that may be a third party that could be successful in a general election?
The way our country is set up for electing presidents and for running for Congress and Senate, the idea of a third party sort of emerging and being relevant is just not possible. I mean, it's highly unlikely. I mean, I think probably the most successful people have been people like Ross Perot in 1992, and you had crazy guys like Jesse Ventura win in Minnesota several years ago. But the idea that you're going to have sort of a third party emerge and be at the same sort of level and stature simply just based upon the structure of the way our party system is today just seems highly unlikely. I think the question is going to be, the better question to ask is, what is going to prevail here? Is it going to be, is the divide truly what they could call sort of the establishment wing of the party, the DC intelligentsia, the thought leaders of the conservative movement? Are they going to eventually embrace sort of this new populist philosophy that is, not very conservative in many ways? That, to me, I think is the question, because it seems to me, based upon the voter data, the way people are voting, people are responding to this. And I think this is sort of a problem of the Republican Party as a whole over the last 8 to 10 years, is that a lot of people have not been able to get how some of the things that Republicans promised, campaigned on, talked about, has sort of translated into their daily lives and improved it. And you're talking about Republican primary voters. And if Republican primary voters feel that, it sort of further validates why they're losing general elections and why people like Donald Trump are winning primaries. So I don't know so much there's going to be a third party. I think it's going to be a core struggle, much like when the South realigned for Republicans in the 60s, and much like, how California transitioned from being heavily Republican to Democratic, and how I think we're going through one of those trends where it's more about core beliefs within the party and what the party is going to stand for versus the creation sort of a new party.
Okay. With the upcoming national convention, the Republican National Convention in July, we'll have 2,470 delegates, 2,302 alternate delegates. Is there still a mathematical way for Trump to not end up with the nomination based on the Republican National Convention, or is that even a strategy that's being talked about anymore?
No, it's a dead issue. I mean, he's going to have more than enough delegates by the time the convention comes around. They will be legally bound to vote for him. So,
all right.
I think the strategy at the convention for people like Ted Cruz, for people like Marco Rubio, people like John Kasich, others who have actually won delegates in the primary process, I think their goal is going to be sort of this conversation of like, how do we make sure that the Republican Party platform that the party votes on at the convention, a lot of people don't really understand sort of all of the ins and outs of the convention because of the way the television, you have people speak at prime time and tune in, your nominee is accepted, but there's a lot of party business that happens. What the
Tell us a
platform
little bit more.
What are going to be the core issues that we're going to stand for? And I think those are the things that those delegates who are elected to vote for Trump or vote for Cruz or Rubio or Kasich or Jeb, I think they're going to be fighting to make sure that remains the platform.
One of the other trends I think that I've heard in talking to really both Republicans and Democrats is this idea of I'm not happy with any presidential candidate fully, and some of the impetus to vote has been to vote against someone instead of voting for someone. And at times when you don't have a candidate of choice, you just abstain from voting, but that can be just as dangerous as voting along party lines just to stay to trend. So how does that trend resonate with you? Have you heard of that talk in the party specifically of people who say, I've been a lifelong Republican, but I won't vote for Donald Trump. Does that mean that they're going to vote for presumptively Hillary or abstain from voting?
That's a fantastic question. And just one really quick thought to back up on the convention side. I think the convention is going to be much more exciting to watch is going to be the Democratic one. And because that contest is still not wrapped up. So right. I think if you're talking about if it's going to be contentious, I think that one's going to be more contentious. In regards to your specific question about voting against somebody, that's true. And the data absolutely shows that. You know, it's pretty remarkable when you're sitting here as a Republican strategist. You know, for the last 4 years, you know, people like myself, we have just like thirst and been eager for the idea of running against Hillary Clinton. You have a person who has been in politics for over 30 years, who has a clearly defined record, who Republicans argue don't have very many accomplishments on her record, and I get that's debatable, but someone who's clearly been in the public atmosphere after 8 years of a president, you know, typically changes parties the next time. And the only time it hasn't changed was in 1988 when the popularity of Ronald Reagan carried George H.W. Bush to the White House. And before that, it had been like 100 years. So the idea that a party continues a 12th year dominance of the White House is very unlikely. And so you're thinking about all of these sorts of things, and on paper, Republicans are like, Jesus, the White House is ours to lose. And then you see the data behind it, and you have the most unpopular person nominated or about to be nominated to run for president in the history. And then they nominate a guy who just happens to be more unpopular. The guy's name is Donald Trump. So instead of this election being a referendum on Hillary Clinton, in some ways it's turning into a referendum upon Donald Trump. And you really take and you look at the data, I think it's like Clinton is viewed unfavorably by the American electorate, like 58, 59%. More importantly, like 60 to 65% of Americans just don't trust her. Mm-hmm. This is a person who's been in public life for 30, 40 years, literally, since she was the first lady of Arkansas. And then you got another guy who just like women, Hispanics, you know, everyone who's not a white demographic male older voter has these unbelievably strong feelings against Donald Trump. And his approval ratings are like, he's viewed like negatively by like 65% of the country. Mm-hmm. So when you're a voter and you're sitting there, you're like, yes, like who the heck do you vote for when you don't like either one of these? And nobody likes either candidate. And so I think, yes, I think a lot of people are voting against. I think you're going to be hearing people who are going to be saying, I'm going to vote for Trump because I don't trust Hillary Clinton. And you think you're going to hear the same thing. I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton because I think Donald Trump is crazy or I don't trust him or whatever that is. But there's no grand vision that either one has so far portrayed that rallies voters to vote for them. No one is rallying to a cause. People who are rallying to a cause are like people like Bernie Sanders. He's probably the only one who's probably viewed favorably in this entire process.
Right.
So, yes, I think a lot of people are going to be voting against the candidate as opposed to a candidate. And more importantly, I think what's really sad about that is presidential election, they're supposed to be about like the direction the country's supposed to take, a vision. You know, in 2008, the reason Barack Obama won is because he had a broader vision on what the country needed to do. You know, same thing with Ronald Reagan in 1980. You know, same thing with JFK in 1960. I mean, these people set broad goals and visions to direct the country that rally voters to their side. We're not having that debate right now. And that's really unfortunate for the country because this is what the election should be about. It shouldn't be about Donald Trump's Twitter account or Hillary Clinton's email. It should be about what is the grand vision for this country. And neither one has proposed that. And I think that's going to be the result of people voting against somebody as opposed for somebody.
Right. Okay, so can we give a little sneak peek as to the conversation about vice presidential nominees?
Yep. So, you know, it's like the thing like everybody gets really worked up about picking a vice president. And when I worked for Governor Romney and we released or announced Paul Ryan as our pick, you know, the lead up to it was so exciting. And, you know, I was not directly part of the process. We had a small sort of team that led the vetting process and sort of went through those traditional channels to do it. And so when we found out about it a few days before the pick was actually announced, it was huge excitement. And then we announce it, and it's like a day of excitement, but like people don't vote for vice president. You know what I mean? It's just not the point. But the reason vice president is important is it's literally it's the first and the most important decision that the president is going to make. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what it means is like I'm picking somebody. Should God, something happen to me, person can carry out the vision of our country. So that's the importance of picking vice president. Now, it's sort of anticlimactic when it all happens, as I mentioned. But in my profession, like, these are the things like we like clamor for, is like gossip to us. So I think on the Republican side, you look at a guy who is not involved in politics, who's very unconventional in many ways. And if I were advising a Donald Trump campaign, you would be advising him to pick someone who sort of plays to your weaknesses among voters. So he's unpopular among women, Hispanics. Again, like I said, basically any white male voter who isn't a white male voter doesn't really like Donald Trump right now. So good candidates would be governor of New Mexico, my home state, Susana Martinez, 2-term governor, Hispanic, the first Hispanic elected female governor in the country, successful governor, really good, conservative, more of the mold of the Paul Ryan. You got somebody like Nikki Haley in South Carolina, who is, for everything you want to make, I think she has been such a fantastic governor and really changing the way the Republican Party is viewed in the state of South Carolina. Why is that important? Because there's a lot of battle wound scars that still exist in South Carolina from, segregation, so forth and so on. And she's really put a new face to that. Another obvious choice would be somebody like Marco Rubio, a successful Hispanic voter from a swing state of Florida that could really help the Trump campaign carry that. The problem is I don't think any of those guys want to run with Donald Trump. So you're left with the people who would really be a game changer in this election are really not going to be involved. So you're probably left with a couple of candidates who want the job. I think Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House, wants the job. Newt has had this long desire to remain relevant in Republican politics. If I were a betting man today, I would say that's the most likely pick to happen on the Trump side. I think another potential person could be somebody like John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, who also ran. There was always sort of this lingering chattering that the reason Kasich stayed in so long was to help Trump, and whether that holds true or not, he would be also an attractive choice because he's from Ohio, swing state, so forth and so on. So ultimately, I don't think he's going. And then maybe the third one would probably be Governor Christie of New Jersey.
Right.
And that, to me, I heard something on the radio this morning that Donald Trump sort of admires loyalty, and Chris Christie was sort of the first mainstream Republican to come out and endorse him. I think that would be a smart pick from an optics perspective. I think the resentment that exists among the Republican Party for Chris Christie right now is still really high. I don't know if politically it makes sense. On the Democratic side, this campaign, the one that's actually, I think, been more exciting is the Democratic campaign. You've got, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders sort of still duking it out. And the campaign that Bernie is running is changing the Democratic Party as well. So ultimately, Hillary's going to win. The question is, like, does she limp across the finish line or does she finish strong? She needs to pick somebody of the progressive mindset like Bernie Sanders. Someone like Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio would be a great pick for her. Somebody obviously like Elizabeth Warren would probably be a game changer for her. So ultimately, I think the pick of VP comes down to playing to your weaknesses. I think if I'm Hillary, I'm trying to probably pick a male or somebody with some sort of diverse background. I think the Transportation Secretary, Julian Castro, is often rumored as one. If I'm Trump, I'm looking for somebody with government experience, which, somebody like Newt or John Kasich or Chris Christie, I'll check the box. But I also would be looking for somebody with national security experience. Somebody like Bob Gates would be great. Obviously, everybody would love to see Condoleezza Rice in that regard. I just think the question is going to come back: do people want to be on the same ticket as Trump? So
right.
It's a little bit difficult there.
Cool. So I have one last question. It's not necessarily related to Republican politics. What's it like to be married to Miss DC 2012, Jen Corey, Baca?
Oh, man. Well, it's never boring, for one. That's definitely for sure. We both have never seen a camera we didn't like, so that's a really good thing.
Or a dance floor you didn't like. I said, or a dance floor you didn't like.
Or a dance floor we didn't like. And, I think probably the best part is Jen has so many great characteristics. She's smart, she's funny, she's beautiful, she's successful. Everything she touches turns into gold, and like obviously like those are all her best qualities. I think probably the thing that I love about her and admire about her the most is that she's really more of a compliment to me than like my exact same person, and really is sort of that person that really challenges me to think about things differently, see the world differently, and more importantly puts up with my like BS and all the stuff that comes with working in politics. So that's obviously a really good part. It has a huge influence. I mean, the conversation we're talking about, I have core views upon conservatism and Republican Party that make me who I am, and I believe in those things. But I would be lying to you if I didn't see the world differently now because of her. I mean, I was one of the Republicans who signed the brief to the Supreme Court saying that gay marriage should be legal. There are only 200 Republicans who signed that. People who worked in Republican politics, and well, I think the belief was always there, and like I always felt that. I was sort of like of the opinion, like, do I want to put my neck out there? Like, what are the consequences for this? What is the consequences for my career? I think she was sort of like, you either believe it or you don't, and like if you care about what people think, then like you really probably don't believe very strongly in it. It's like probably a good point. So I threw my name out there.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy the amount of discovery and personal growth that comes from competing in the Miss America organization, but it's really from that preparation. We've been forced to prepare across so many issues to the point that we could probably take on a presidential debate with the amount of knowledge that we are forced to possess or expected to possess.
The similarities of preparing somebody for Miss America or for running for Miss New York or Miss District of Columbia are so similar to running for like a candidate for office. Like you got to make sure they know what to say, how to say it. You got to make sure they know how to look. They know how to shake hands, who to shake hands with. I mean, the similarities to me are like very much the same. In fact, like the first time I went to the Miss District of the Miss DC pageant, I was sort of like, oh my God, like this is a political race. This is not like anything else. Any stereotype I had at that moment was like instantly broken down. I'm like, let's run a campaign. I want to be one of these girls' campaign managers and tell them like how to win. So the similarities are striking, to be honest with you.
Well, hey, maybe if we have a couple defined girls win their state pageants, we'll bring you on as their campaign managers, their campaign advisors.
Yeah, we'll lock in the judges and get them on board.
I don't know if we want to go that far, but thanks so much, Joshua, for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it, and for you sharing your expertise with all of our clients.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.